Every project in this series gets 2 weeks to complete. When the timer hits 0, that's it. Game over. I stop. Finished or not? Welcome to Doomsday Protocol. That's right, you heard it here first, folks. Doomsday Protocol, the only YouTube video series where we do projects in 2 weeks. Probably not true. I'm a computer engineer by trade with a long history of doing projects on the side, and I decided to start documenting them in a YouTube-friendly format. Along with this, I'm imposing some special rules. Every project that this series covers will take 2 weeks. That's not to say I won't be doing other projects, but the projects in this series will be 2 weeks. So let's get into it. For our first project, we need something to keep track of time. A countdown clock, if you will, to keep track of the 2 weeks we have remaining until our project is complete. My first thought for this was to do a Nixie tube clock. This right here. Why Nixie tubes, you ask? Because they're freaking cool. They're retro. They're hot. They could possibly catch my house on fire. There's a bazillion reasons to use Nixie tubes. What Nixie tubes, you might ask? Yeah, I got that a lot. When I was starting this project, when I was doing this project, I had a lot of people asking me or just not knowing what Nixie tubes were. So for all you youngins out there, here's a quick recap on what Nixie tubes are.
Nixie tubes are early electronic display devices, glass bulbs filled with a low-pressure noble gas.
You'll see these a lot in the Fallout series or other kind of retro, futuristic stuff. Now, I dabbled with some Nixie tubes back about 6 years ago when I was living in Austin, Texas. So I had some of the supplies on hand, including Nixie tubes, drivers, some 170-volt power supplies, and some tube sockets. So let's do a quick rundown of what this circuit generally would have entailed. So on a Nixie tube, you've got these Nixie tubes here, right? They've got all these pins. The Nixie tubes operate on a 170-volt voltage rail. You still need some sort of logic to trigger which number is actively showing, because these are essentially just stacked numbers that you are choosing to illuminate. But essentially what you need to do is you need to make one of these pins pass current in order to illuminate a specific number in the Nixie tube. For something like this, we need to control which numbers are active at what times in order to cycle the clock. Enter the microcontroller. You could use any basic microcontroller for this. I would have used something like an Arduino or a Raspberry Pi Pico. A microcontroller typically is going to operate at a 5 volt or a 3.3 volt logic with very little current going through it. Definitely not enough to power this bad boy. What you need is a driver chip. What does a driver chip do? The long and short of it is it's going to take these little 3.3 or 5 volt logic signals from this microcontroller, and it's going to turn them into big ol' 170 volt voltage levels to go into this Nixie tube. And it does that by taking 170 volts from this 170 volt supply and basically just having the output pins reflect the status of the input pin. Really all you need to know is the main circuit is converting low voltage logic from here and turning it to high voltage logic over here. So, quick spoiler. I was working on this. I got a couple days into it, and I realized my tubes were cracked. They had been cracked probably for some time. I just didn't know. And I didn't discover that until I was plugging them into the sockets, which I'm about 90% sure the sockets themselves cracked the Nixie tubes by forcing the pins on the inside into weird positions. Which is to say, I'm not saying don't use tube sockets if you do a project with Nixie tubes in the future or tubes in general, but if I could do it again, I probably would have drilled a circuit board with holes that I could have tested or made a stencil with a 3D print to figure out where the holes were and just drilled through printed circuit board and then soldered the wires on the bottom. Anyways, it's a bummer. The tubes are cracked and I had to pivot. So what could I use for numerical output in place of Nixie tubes? Well, let's see what we got. So for the past year, I've been working on a project that utilized numerical displays like this. This is called a 7-segment display. 7-segment displays have 7 individual LED bars here.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
And you light up individual LEDs in order to create numbers. I happen to have a ton of these on hand. These little breakout boards are slick because they have the driver chip installed on them. You can get these on Amazon. I got a bunch from Alibaba. I'll put the link in the description below if you want to use them for something. They're cheap and they're simple. So I knew I had these, and that was basically all I needed to proceed with my new design. And so we pivot to formerly Nixie tube countdown clock, now 7-segment display, 2-week countdown clock. So that's what we're working with. We also need some kind of enclosure and a button to make it so we can reset the signal. To be fair, I should have done a little bit better job of just doing the proper engineering process on the front of this and explaining the different requirements of the project. So we're going to do this completely out of order, and we're going to address what the project requirements were. Okay, so proper engineering process. We define the problem. We need a way to keep track of our 2-week projects. Requirements? Well, let's think of some of the requirements might be. We need to be able to display up to 2 weeks of time in some arbitrary format. And we need some way to reset the timer when the 2 weeks have elapsed. We're going to keep the requirements of this project really straightforward and simple with just these two. We've already run into issues with the Nixie tubes, and I just wanted to mitigate any potential other issues along the road. So this is it. So in order to address these requirements, we have the 7-segment display for this one, and we need some kind of button or other method to reset the timer. Now, making it reset could have been as easy as just saying you have to unplug it and plug it back in to reset the timer. But okay, I'm not a hack. We're going to put a button on it and use that to make it so you can reset the timer to 2 weeks every time. So that's it. That's our requirements. We have our 7-segment display that addresses this guy, and we have a button that addresses this guy. So for every project I do, I keep a PowerPoint document to kind of track how the project progresses. So here's the first meaningful slide from this presentation. One of the first things I do when I'm making a project, I don't love having a rat's nest of wires floating around. So what I'll typically do is I'll take one of these breadboard systems, I'll 3D print a small platform to do testing on and to kind of keep things a little bit more organized, especially when there are fragile parts involved. So as you can see, even using this platform to keep things organized, it still turns into a rat's nest pretty quickly. What I did here is I wired up 2 test 7-segment displays I had lying around to the embed microcontroller and generated some basic code to do it with. So I admittedly did not document the process of wiring up the breadboard at all, shy of taking pictures at the end. So I'm going to step through how you would wire up something similar through Wokwi. Wokwi is a cool little web-based Arduino simulator. You should check it out if you haven't already. Using an Arduino. I ported my embed code over into Arduino over here. To start with, we need to look at these 7-segment displays we pulled in here, which I acquired by getting this and looked for the TM1637 displays, which is exactly the driver chip that is used on those breakout boards. And then I had to go into the library manager and add the TM1637 and this timer one for hardware timer interrupts. Each one of these segment displays needs a ground. So we're going to go ahead and feed that to ground here. We'll do that for both of them. I don't know if you can connect nodes on here. We'll just assume they go like that. Both of them need VCC, which for these is 5 volts. So we're going to go ahead and grab them 5 volts. They each need 5 volt access. And then they both have a data line and a clock line. So we're going to call this one the days, hours, and this one the minutes, seconds. Over here in the code, we can see that days, hours, data line, DIO, goes to 5. So we're going to pin this out and take it over to 5 here. Its clock line goes to 4. So we're going to go here, here, here. There we go. And the data line for the minutes, seconds goes to pin 6. So we're going to skirt around here. There we go. And clock line for the minutes, seconds Oh, clock goes to pin 6. Whoops. That means the data line goes to 7. So clock line to 6. Let's see what happens when we hit play right now. All right, we have our countdown going, which is great, but we have a button that doesn't do anything. And so if we needed to reset this, we can't do that. So let's hook that up real quick. We'll look at where the button pin is. That's button pin 2. So we're going to take button pin 2 here. Oh, getting tight. We're going to come down here and connect it to one side of this button. We're going to connect the other side of this button to ground. And we do that because this button pin 2, is configured with a pull-up resistor on the input. What that means is that when it's not actively connected to ground, it's going to want to be driven to 5 volts. Input pull-up basically means that within the microcontroller, it is pulling this pin to 5 volts unless it is actively pulled down to ground. So let's see what happens. All right, so we have our timer. Cool. Let's go ahead and see if we can reset it. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi.
Good news, everyone.
All right, and holding it down for 3 seconds resets it. So we'll do a quick step through on the code. So as you can see, we've got a number of LED pins defined out here. There's extra LEDs that are floating around on this board used for aesthetic purposes. We won't focus on that for now, but you'll see it on the final product. And we've got our button pin where we're configuring it for an input pull-up. These two are configured as outputs because they're just driving LEDs. For the 7-segment displays, there are a number of functions you have to call before you use them, which is set brightness. If you don't do this, you won't see anything on these guys and you'll think they're broken. Clear, which clears the values. And then we just go ahead and preload these with zeros and show the colon so we make sure that's all prepped there. And we create our 1-second timer interrupt. So every 1 second, a timer will interrupt and set this global variable on set tick to true. Very straightforward. So in the main loop, this main loop is going to constantly run. Every time it runs, it's going to come around and grab the current value in milliseconds, and it's going to check if a 1-second tick has elapsed. If so, it's going to update all the values in the display based on the current millisecond value of the clock of this device. So quick caveat, when I was talking about the requirements earlier, one thing that I kind of glossed over is time. I would be remiss if I did not mention most microcontrollers will experience timing drift due to small deviation in the timing circuits, the oscillators, crystals, etc. that drive the microcontroller. But we're going to drive ahead and not care about it for this one. And in the event that the amount of time remaining on the clock is less than 0, you will be at the end of the countdown clock and it will output 0. I do include every 1 second this toggle LED, and that was there as a diagnostics tool early on to allow me to know if the 1 second tick was executing at the proper rate. Then we get out of that chunk of time processing and we get into the button processing. Now with a button, you typically want to do a debounce circuit or algorithm. In effect, the long duration of button holding that we check for acts as a debounce in and of itself. And down here we set a PWM value for the brightness of the button LED. The button has a little LED in it. I kind of wanted to make a slow breathe, so there was something a little more dynamic than just numbers. So the top button slowly over time gets dimmer or brighter. So everything I just went through is exactly what I did in real life on a little proto board, resulting in this. Now I need to convert that crappy rat's nest full of breadboard wires that will fall out if you look at them the wrong way into something more solid, a soldered proto board. And we need an enclosure. Now I have to apologize in advance. I did not take any video of the soldering process for making the prototype board. However, we can step backwards through my enclosure design and take a look at how that evolved. So as you can see, this is the final product. I ended up adding cutouts for days, hours, minutes, seconds, which I used a backlit LED panel for. Makes it look kind of cool. Not a requirement, but thought it would help clarify so people know that it's days, hours, minutes, seconds on each number. I put a little recessed area here for a clear plastic shield to protect the 7-segment displays. I have these tiny acrylic sheets, which I ordered from Send Cut Send. They are custom designed to fit 7-segment displays that I was using, and I just reshaped the letters to fit these on the backside. For the letters, I spray painted this white and then shined a light through it to kind of diffuse it and make it look cool. And a button hole on top to install the button. Anybody who's ever been interested in the CAD process, first thing I did is add a new component, which is going to be the front panel. I did a sketch. I extruded the sketch. So you can see I've pretty well fully defined the front panel right off the bat. Then I extended the wall, created the cutouts for the letters, added a sketch on the top for the top button, cut the hole for the button. This is where I created the circuit board stand-in. Currently, it's not joined, so you kind of have to think about it as just being by itself. And at this point, I have joined the circuit board with the enclosure. I added some chamfers, filleted those out. Now we have the rear lid. You can see I put a little key slot hole to hang this on the wall if I wanted to. The back of it sits flush into the front of it on these guidelines here. And there's a cutout at the bottom for the wire to feed out. So then I 3D printed this. After 3D printing and painting, we had this. With the enclosure built and the soldered protoboard all assembled, it was time to install the whole thing, which, due to proper planning, was as simple as sliding the circuit board into place and doing a little bit of on-the-spot soldering. Typically, I don't like to solder inside of an enclosure like that, but I winged it on this one. So at this point, the project was complete. The circuit board I put together is slid into the grooves appropriately, and the LEDs that are front-facing are backlighting these semi-transparent shields. The 7-second displays are in place. The button is in place. Everything is looking good. It's ready to go. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the one, the only Doomsday Protocol clock. Complete with recitable numbers. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the conclusion of episode 000. That's ambitious. The clock will live right there for now, and we'll be resetting it when we start the next project. Thanks so much for hanging in there with me. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to hit like and feel free to subscribe. And until next time, this is Doomsday Protocol.